Hi, Sarah here. Welcome back. So, I am moving apartments. We are finally at the point where I'm packing away my decks. So, I wanted to show off my collection in its current state before I pack them away. I think that there is value in reviewing and just sharing like how my collection is at the time. It's just cool to see how my tastes change over time, what I was into before versus what I'm into now. This video is going to be all the tarot card decks that I have. Then the next video will be oracle decks and my charm casting or my casting stuff and my books. So tarot decks in this video only. Let's get to it. The first deck I'll show is the Age of Aquarius Tarot. This one is a really beautiful collage deck. I haven't done much or had much collage decks. They never really appealed to me, but this one is different. The creator has included a bunch of different additional major arcana here. You can see already in these cards how absolutely beautiful this is. So this being a collage deck, there's just a lot of different elements, different photos that have been stitched together. The way that the collage has been done here is so seamless. Like, it just makes me feel like these are real images and real photos, not just different parts, different things stitched together. There are keywords on the top and the bottom here. This is probably one of the more spiritual decks that I have, the more elemental decks. I usually don't gravitate to decks that have this like really ethereal, watery, elemental, spiritual energy, or this vibe, this imagery. But this one just really called to me when I saw a walkthrough of it. For the Tarot Snail Mail reading swap in January, I actually used this deck to do a reading for that. I felt like this was just wonderful, like renewal type energy, January energy. Even though so far I've very infrequently used this deck, I really enjoy having it. I really enjoy looking at it. I've flipped through it like quite a few times, and I know that when I feel ready to do a reading with this deck, it's just going to be a very powerful and also meditative kind of reading. So, Age of Aquarius Tarot. Next is the Story Medicine Tarot, Green Edition, Seaweed Sisters. I know that the creator has done like a few chapters or iterations of the Story Medicine Tarot. I believe this is like chapter 4. Because there's 4 different decks that she's created. So this one will feature nudity. Obviously skip ahead if you're not into nudity. Okay, this deck, it's quite a powerful, very shamanic deck. And similar to the previous deck, I don't normally gravitate towards decks that are very spiritual and very shamanic like this. But when I saw a walkthrough, actually no, I didn't even see a walkthrough first. I saw someone selling this deck secondhand, and after looking at like 1 or 2 walkthroughs, I just felt so moved by the imagery. I almost felt in awe and like intimidated by the imagery and the words, the mantras on each card. The creator actually made a documentary that details her journey of making this deck, making it come to life, making the paintings, and the whole like shamanic process of making this deck happen. You know, I did not expect to watch it because I'm not normally into like really spiritual stuff like that, but I just felt like this deck would be really interesting to work with and really fascinating to work with. Let me see if I can show you the major arcana as well. I pulled the Magician as one of my favorite magicians across all of my tarot decks, the Secret Dance. The green in this deck is a lot. I know that it's not, you know, for everyone. Somehow I really don't mind it. I just find this deck really, really powerful. All of the majors have been renamed. There's just a lot. There's just a lot. I really like flipping through this deck and absorbing the images. I can only flip through like a few at a time and like really read through at a time, but it's a really, really powerful experience, and I'm looking forward to eventually working with this deck some more. So yeah, that's the Story Medicine Tarot, Seaweed Sisters. Next, another larger deck is the Modern Love Tarot, Exploring the Many Facets of Love by Ethany. I'll just flip through a few cards, no need to grab everything. So these are also larger cards. I've been on a kick with larger cards recently. I really enjoy the tactile difference that larger cards have versus the smaller standard size tarot cards. I did a walkthrough with this one recently in the past couple months. I guess that's sort of recent. I just have a lot of personal like associations and personal feelings about some of the cards in this deck. So I did a walkthrough sharing like just personal associations and stories, things that the deck reminded me of. This deck, even though it's called the Modern Love Reading, I do enjoy using it for any type of like life type readings. I guess life as in like just everyday things or general life things. Okay, that did not make any sense. But yeah, it's just a fun deck to use for any type of reading, even though the original like intention for the deck was for love. Very beautiful, vibrant deck with large cards, beautiful foiling on the back, a fun experience to work with. Next, another large deck is the Everyday Enchantment Tarot. This is clearly not the bag that goes with the deck. This is an avatar bag that I got from Push Kitty, who created the little avatar tarot. And this is what the box looks like. I am keeping it in a separate bag because the box, it's a split box thing, and I do not want to keep the cards in a separate like stack like this. I bought this secondhand, so I'm really happy to give it a try. Funny thing about the two sides of the deck, because the deck comes in like the two stacks like that, the publisher likely cut the cards separately, so you can see a very clear difference in the two stacks of the deck, unfortunately. I know that when I shuffle it, it'll even out a lot better, but this is just an unfortunate happening, you know? And also the corners were actually cut like unevenly, so I actually went through myself with my own corner rounder and just literally cut the corners on each one. They're not perfect, but the corners do look a lot better now that I've cut it myself than I did before. So Everyday Enchantment Tarot, I plan to do a comparison walkthrough between this deck and the Modern Love Tarot, which I just showed. Both of them do feature a lot of like moments from life in these cards. And it's funny because I had once said that I don't like to get decks that are like based on real situations, because when I read them, it feels like I'm just going to pigeonhole this meaning into like the reading. For example, like if I see the Ace of Wands in the past, I would have thought, oh, I'm not going to see the Ace of Wands as anything else except for starting a new painting. But honestly, like much time later, I feel like my opinions have changed. I feel like my study of tarot just necessitates me to have and study these kinds of decks. I can learn from these decks even if I don't always do readings with them. So I was curious about this deck, that's why I bought it, and I am just curious to study it more, to read from the book. I've heard that this is a really good one, so that's why I ended up buying it, just to give it a try. So that is the Everyday Enchantment Tarot. Another larger deck is the Tarot of Light. I bought this deck secondhand as well. I bought it from Honey Lou Wilson at the end of last year. So this is Honey Lou's writing here. Angels are swords, hearts are cups, trees are pentacles, stars are wands. I have not gotten a chance to dive into this deck yet either. I know that that is a theme among a lot of decks that I've gotten recently, but what can I say? You know, my tastes in tarot just change. I feel like reading with different things here and there, but I have flipped through it a few times and I'm just really intrigued by it. This is another deck that I also would not have gravitated to in the past because it feels a little bit more like spiritual or airy, kind of like light really, and I'm not really into like light or abstract. Okay, that's not the word. What am I trying to think of? Normally I'm into decks that are more grounded rather than dealing with like the heavens or angels or light or things like that. But somehow the art of this deck is just speaking to me a little bit. I've flipped through it and I've enjoyed the flip throughs enough that I want to keep it around. I know eventually I am going to work with this deck as I do with all my decks. Just showing it here because y'all can see how my tastes have ebbed and flowed over the years. It's just really pretty, dude. Really, really pretty. And it's, I don't know, the imagery is like relatively simple. It's not too hard on the eyes, not too hard to read with. So that's the Tarot of Light. Another larger deck I have is the Gaian Tarot. I also bought this one secondhand. I think this was also from Honey Lou Wilson. I bought a whole load of mass market decks from her in the last year, so this is one of the ones that I kept. I believe this one usually comes with a big box. I do have the big book that comes with it, but not the big box. So this one, in the theme of kind of more spiritual, like connected to the earth decks, you know, I never would have thought I'd be into this in the past. You know, when I received this, I was almost ready to give it up right away because I was like, oh, I am not going to connect with it. But after flipping through it a few times, and also Laura of Aquamarine 18, they mentioned how they even did like a deep dive study with Sarah from Waterchild Tarot, and it just made me second guess or look at the deck in a different way. So I did initially think like, oh, this is not like my culture or my type of deck, my type of people, but I think it has a lot to teach me as well. I like that the kings are actually renamed elders. I know the Spacious Tarot does that too. yeah, I don't know. I just find this really nurturing and honestly really exciting to look at. So I'm looking forward to diving more into this. I've already pulled a few majors from this deck out into my top tarot trumps times tarot memoirs hashtag videos. So far this deck already has things to teach me. So I'm looking forward to learning more from it when I get around to it. So that is the Gaian Tarot. Another deck is the Somnia Tarot. This one I have had for like at least 2 years at this point. My favorite use for this one, as I mentioned, is for doing secular past life readings. I say secular because I am atheist or at least agnostic, and I don't have any like actual psychic or spiritual connection to past lives, but I really like using this deck for the idea of doing past life readings. I just find the imagery so intuitive to me. I really like that the people in this deck have no faces. It makes it easier to imagine these as just characters and figures rather than like people. It's very easy to project onto the characters. I also really like the cloaks. It just gives it a very like magical feel. It just amazes me how a deck can be so expressive without using faces. Like all the different body language, all the different like things that people are wearing, the ways that you frame the photo, whether close or far away. It just is really, really fascinating to me. I've never connected with a photographic deck as much as I have with this one. So this one just really does feel like the art of photography rather than like just any regular old person taking a cell phone and taking a picture without understanding like composition and framing and set dressing and all that. So this is the Somnia Tarot, definitely one of my favorite decks in my collection. Next is a deck I've got very recently. It is the Many Queens Tarot. There we are, the Many Queens Tarot. Nudity warning, by the way, there is some boobage in this deck and some genitalia. So I have historically not connected to black and white decks or monochromatic decks. I gave away the Light Visions Tarot because it just wasn't my vibe. But this one, surprisingly, like, I just felt like it was time in my life for me to get another wacky deck. And I say wacky in like an endearing way, you know? In a way that like I need more wackiness, more experimentalness, more unconventionalness in my life. I actually just gave away the Colorful Tears Tarot last year because I just wasn't connecting with it. So I am surprised at myself for having this deck and not also letting it go. But this deck, it feels very drag, very adventurous in a way that I feel like aligns with me more than themes of the Colorful Tears Tarot did. The body language, the postures, the figures, shapes, even like the body hair, it just, I don't know, just feels very fun, very liberating, very normal to me. I just got this deck in last month, so it's fairly new to me, but I've already done a couple of readings revolving around play and inviting more fun and experimentation into my life. So this deck is already packing a punch. It's already giving me some value. So that's the Many Queens Tarot. Next is the Flow Tarot. This one does not come with a box. I've made a bag for it. So this one is a water-themed photographic deck. First of all, this is Make Playing Cards cardstock, and it is such a dream to shuffle. I really love shuffling these cards. So smooth, so seamless, so easy. I initially thought that these were just photographs, but I did hear somewhere that some of the images were photo manipulated. So this is not like an accurate representation of nature. I really, really like the keywords and the themes of this deck. I think the fact that this is like only water based or water themed, it just makes the deck so cohesive in a way that I don't find in many other decks. This is one of those decks that I just understand intuitively. I grew up relatively close to the beach, but I've never really cared much for the beach. I don't like being sandy and having to come home and wash off, but I do really like water in theory, even though I don't like the sand part. So I don't know, this deck just really speaks to me. A lot of the cards do speak to me very obviously, and other cards, they require some like thinking, but this is definitely a deck that I enjoy having now because I would not have understood how to intuit messages from these cards in my first couple years of learning tarot. So that is the Flow Tarot, a beautiful prized deck. Next, we have these couple decks that I keep in a pouch because they're very similar. One is the Tarot of Architectural Objects, and the other is the Naturescapes Tarot. These two decks were made by the same creator, by Tina of Queen of Wands. They both feature no people, only landscapes or photos. So these are both photo curated decks where you know, this creator just curated a bunch of different photos into the different tarot meanings, the tarot cards here. This one on the right, Tarot of Architectural Objects, features only architectural objects. So it's a really, really fascinating, almost spacious deck. I actually consider this like a very Taurus themed deck because I really like looking at buildings, going places, looking at architecture, but what I don't like is like the crowds of people around me. I get very annoyed slash anxious slash overwhelmed by like really big crowds of people or by crowds of tourists, really. And I know that if I was visiting any of these places, I would also be a tourist. So why would I get annoyed at other people for doing like the same thing I'm doing, you know, being a tourist? This deck feels like Taurus energy, not tourist energy, Taurus energy, like the bull. It feels like Taurus energy because it's a chance for me to see and get close-ups of these different buildings and different architectural objects without having to go through like the anxiety of being around people in real life. So this is Tarot of Architectural Objects, and this is Naturescapes Tarot. Many people have said that this is a good substitute for the Majestic Earth Tarot, and I do agree. It does feature like photographs rather than oil paintings like the Majestic Earth Tarot. If you're looking for landscapes and just the spaciousness, the earthiness, like this Naturescapes Tarot has it all. It's funny because my sibling, who was also into tarot, they were looking at my decks like the last time they visited, and they were looking at this deck. They were like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. Why is it this? Why is it that? So I think it's funny, you know, obviously some people are not gonna understand or get it. Like, I know these decks are not for everyone. I really have enjoyed pulling from these decks, just single card pulls for my week or for my day or for a general message. I've had these decks on my table for like since January. So I've really enjoyed just pulling from these decks for simple messages, either together or separately. So Naturescapes Tarot and Tarot of Architectural Objects. Another deck is the Affirmators Tarot. This one, I don't have too much to say. It's just a very cute deck, very fun, oversized cards. You know, the cards are surprisingly really, really easy to shuffle. They've got a really nice like bend to them like this. And they've got a linen-ish finish. If we look really closely, you can see the texture on the cards here. So the finish on these cards helps the air move between the cards like really easily. Like here's a shuffle demonstration. Dude, that is amazing. So Affirmators Tarot. All right, stop shuffling now. I don't connect with animal energy too much, but I do enjoy having this deck because of the body language and the expressions in this card and these cards. It's a very simple, straightforward deck. I feel in a good mood just looking at these cards, just having these out in a reading. The guidebook and the deck, they're featured more towards like self-help, self-therapy. So, you know, it's just very nurturing in a way that I really wish I had experienced when I was younger. But I get to experience it now. So that's one of the most adorable decks I have, the Affirmators Tarot. Next in cute decks is the Child Tarot. This one is made by Firefly Tarot. This is their YouTube channel. I was lucky enough to stumble upon this deck when they were doing a walkthrough slash pre-order like some time ago. This deck is so endearing to me because it feels like if I were to draw a tarot deck, this is what it would look like. This is like my type of drawing style, and this is also my siblings' type of drawing style when we were younger. So this deck just feels very childlike, and it hits home to me in a way that other child-themed decks don't really hit home with me. The suits in this deck, the pentacles are actually polynoses, which I never played with when I was younger, but I can understand the theme here. What is it? Sunshines for the wands. We have imagination for cups. Cicadas for the swords. The court cards have been renamed as well. We have healer, master, child, and explorer probably. I just find this deck so endearing. It just puts me in that like child-like mindset, but also in a way that I can imagine like these childhood analogies into my like current life. Oh yeah, and it comes with a little guidebook too. So this deck does have everything. It's pretty good, pretty good. So yeah, that is the wonderful, wonderful Child Tarot. Next is the Curious Creatures Tarot by Chris Ann. This one is another wonderful, fun deck, honestly. This one features animal heads on human bodies, which I know is not for everyone, but I really enjoy it. It's just a really fun, kitschy deck, you know? The fact that it's able to convey so much meaning in the body language, the postures, the colors. We don't need human facial expressions to understand like what the vibes of this card is. Like, look at this Queen of Wands just standing or sitting so tall and proud. Also, this cat is adorable. This Three of Pentacles is honestly kind of funny, like seeing this like stepping stones, cats stepping on top of each other to get this thing done. It's just a very emotive deck. Look at these geckos. It's a very emotive deck, very fun. Everyone needs to have this. I don't make the rules. You need to buy this right now if you're into fun decks. So that is the Tarot of Curious Creatures. The other Chris Ann decks I've got are the Lightseer's Tarot and the Muse Tarot. I'll just flip through these together real quick. This one is one of my first decks that I've ever bought a year or two later. I was surprised that I would get this one. Just surprised at seeing myself and my tastes change over time. Even though these two decks and the Curious Creatures were made by the same creator, they could not be more different. I think the only thing that is in common with all these decks is the amazing amount of color and variety of color in these decks. Okay, I know there's glare. I'll just hold them up like this. The Lightseers is one of the first decks I ever bought in my first years of learning tarot. Even though I don't read with the Lightseers too much now, I still enjoy having it around. It's quite sentimental to me. Honestly, there are still symbols and things I can take away from the Lightseers by just having it, by just flipping through it, by just studying with it. And the Muse Tarot on the right here, I really enjoy like the collage work. Like I mentioned, I'm not super into collage work or collage decks normally, but I really like the way that this artist has done it. I guess even though I say I'm not normally into collage decks, I have like 3 of them, so I guess I'm more into them than I thought. I really like the Muse Tarot for creativity. Just seeing the bright colors, it just really inspires me to want to be more creative and to think in analogies. I think that's a really nice thing about artistic decks like this. Like, there are decks like this where I can see almost a more literal meaning of the cards here. But with this deck, I have to stretch my mind a little bit to see the meaning of the card and to imagine how I can use this imagery and apply it to my life. But there are some cards that are easy to intuit meaning from, like this Eight of Emotions or Eight of Cups. You know, very clear, like cutting away all the excess here. The knights in this deck are all horses, and yeah, I just find this deck really delightful to look at and to work with. So Lightseer's Tarot and the Muse Tarot. Next up is the Tarot of Mystical Moments. This one has also bigger cards. I like and also don't like the gilded edges on here. It makes it seem like more of a mystical experience, as the deck says, but the gilding is honestly really harsh and it like cuts into my hands a little bit. But overall, it's still a good price for a deck, so I'm not really complaining there. So this is another collage deck, and it is just really, really beautiful, really poetic. I find a lot of visual poetry in the imagery here, and I really like the kind of soft but bright colors in these cards. I wish that there was more ethnic or racial diversity. I know some people like get annoyed by like people talking about that stuff, but like I wish that there were more. I'm sure that if people looked at, you know, other cultures and other countries' histories for paintings like this, you could easily find them. This is also a deck I've had since almost the beginning of my tarot journey, and I still really enjoy having it and reading with it like all these years later. I love this Ten of Swords. Just look at the big hair. Look at all these people trying to point fingers at this hair. So that's the Tarot of Mystical Moments. Next up is the Dream Vision Tarot. This one I have is the first edition, which does not come with a guidebook. I know the second edition, which is quickly being sold out of the shop, does come with a guidebook. Okay, I don't know why I shuffled. I have the urge to shuffle. This deck just feels very cosmic, very open to read with. I don't always have the right words to describe decks, so maybe I shouldn't try. I really like the characters in this deck. They don't have like full-on faces. You know, no mouths, and their eyes are like mostly closed, but there's still so much expression and so much like energy coming through in these cards. I really like this Page of Wands and the circle around the wand end. It's like a focus on the fire here. I really enjoyed this deck, and there was a brief moment when I thought I would give this away, but then I pulled it out and started doing readings with it, and I was like, wait a minute, no, I can't give this away. This is like a deck that's very intuitive to me. It just gives me so many messages, so many like feelings and thoughts and ideas, despite the imagery being relatively simple. So I really, really enjoy this deck. Cannot believe I ever thought of giving it away. I also used this deck for my Wheel of the Year reading last year. I pulled a card from the Dream Vision Tarot for every single month. So it was really cool to dive into like one particular Dream Vision Tarot card every month and just get to know the imagery, the deck a lot better. I really, really like Wheel Ahead Year spreads for that reason. Just getting to look at different decks, different cards one by one for each month or each quarter, each season. So yeah, that is the Dream Vision Tarot. Next up is the Spacious Tarot. This one is a deck that I got in like the first year of learning tarot. So this one is also like an oldie in my collection, but very much a goodie, oldie but a goodie. I've also got the expansion pack here. So I pulled them out because I am looking to learn more elemental stuff and astrology stuff sometime. I etched this deck in blue, so I just think the blue backs and the blue edges just match so well together. Isn't that gorgeous? I know some people don't like the minor arcana because they can seem pip-ish or very simple, but I think that simplicity really lends itself to why the deck is popular or why it works so well. It just really speaks to me. It's very intuitive to me. I feel like it conveys a lot through its very simple imagery. Nine of Wands. These wands are all crisscrossed across each other, being woven to make a stronger fence, a stronger barrier. This rose represents like the love or the hope that comes out of like all this hard work. So I don't know, I just really like this deck. Yeah. I feel like if I kept talking, I would just say, I like this deck. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Like, okay, we get it. So that is the Spacious Tarot. It's great to work with, great to read with, and just great for slowing down too. Next up is the Vivid Journey Tarot. I made a little bag for this because it comes in a big Llewellyn box and I don't want to have this card in the box all the time. I etched this in little gold color. I wish it was a little bit brighter, but this works okay. Purple backs. The thing that stands out most about this deck is the color schemes, the color palettes. I really enjoy the undercurrent of the gold and the purples that are very apparent throughout this deck. This deck is very Rider-Waite-Smith clone. It's pretty close to like just the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but even so, I enjoy it. It is a little bit annoying how all the knights are like, they look very much the same. Let me see if I can find another knight here. This is the Knight of Wands, for example, and this is the Knight of Swords. They're like the same thing, just the expressions changed and the horse changed and the background changed. The pages also all look very similar, but honestly, that just kind of adds to the charm of the deck. This deck is not very commonly known or available. I don't see it very much on like publisher websites, so I don't know what the deal with that is. Oh yeah, slight nudity in this deck. I really like the colors and the art. It reminds me of a storybook or a picture book. So I pull this out whenever I just want like a very simple, straightforward, almost like comforting kind of reading or comforting cards to look at. So that is the Vivid Journey Tarot. Next is another Llewellyn deck. It's the Mystical Cats Tarot. Also have this in a little bag because it comes in a big box and I do not want the big box all the time. This one I've edged in purple. If I could do this again, I might consider edging it in like gray. I guess the purple is fine with this navy back. This one is just the only cat deck that I own because I love that the cats are very, they just feel very cat-like. The expressions, the body postures, the body languages, they just feel very cat-like. You can even see like the ears, you know, the ears of the cat, like there's a little bit of fear here, possibly sneakiness actually with the Seven of Sky. Very colorful, but it's not so saturated with color like some of my other decks. So the colors feel a lot more realistic than like the super saturated, like childlike decks, I guess. This art, these paintings are really detailed, honestly. In the back of the guidebook, they even included a few pages showing like how the sketches of these paintings before they became like, you know, the full paintings. And even the sketches were just very detailed. I feel like this deck could actually benefit from having like larger cards. This deck is not only good for a pick-me-up to look at really cute cats, but it still packs like quite a punch in these readings. Like these cats are not just having a good time all the time. They go through a lot of different spectrums of emotion, you know, like here's a bunch of different cats with different like expressions, different things in their mouths. Here's cats that are like going through some sort of council meeting. Here's cats kind of running away in fear. So there's a lot of variety in the experiences of these cats. So it's not a very fluffy deck, honestly, but it's a very well-rounded, holistic deck. So that's the Mystical Cats Tarot. Next up is the Revelations Tarot. This one I bought secondhand, and funny story, I actually tried to buy the Revelations Tarot like earlier in my tarot study. I bought it from thrift books and they sent me only the book and not the deck, and I was like, why would you do this? You know, I thought I was paying for the deck, and I tried to return it, but they just said, oh, it was only like 10 bucks, so just keep it, we'll refund you. And I was like, okay. So all those years I actually just kept the book. I never got around to like donating it or giving it away. But sometime later someone was selling the deck secondhand without the book, and I was like, well, so I bought these on separate occasions, and I guess it's working out. I'm glad I didn't buy this like in my first year, because I would not have known what to do with it. Now in my like later years of learning tarot, I have some more curiosity about this deck. So what's really unique about this deck is that it has the upright meaning, or one imagery on one side, and then the other side has the typically like the reversed meaning. I know that there's another deck that also does this, and I find that deck honestly like a bit dark. I guess this deck can also be a bit dark, but the colors are a lot brighter. The way that some of the faces are illustrated is a little bit creepy, but at the same time, I'm still very fascinated by it. So this one I haven't read with much beyond just flipping through the cards and really observing and looking at details and symbols, but it is a really fascinating deck so far. You know, not every deck has to be like an experience or something I can like fully read with all the time. I know that when I do get around to reading with this more and studying it more, it's going to have a lot of things to dive into. And this is a pretty big guidebook for like a mass market deck. So yeah. So that's the Revelations Tarot. Next up are a couple of Sarah Kathleen decks, so I'll show them at the same time. We've got the Creatures Tarot and the Everybody's Tarot. The creator is Sarah Kathleen, and boy, they are absolutely adorable. Absolutely some of my favorite decks. I mean, a lot of my decks in my collection are my favorite decks. Who's gonna argue with that? They both feature very adorable, like, creatures, but they're not the same kind of creatures. They're similar, but not exactly the same. The Creatures Tarot features all creatures that are silhouettes. And they're just so adorable. Look at the lovers, just two little ghosty looking things. Sarah Kathleen is currently doing a Kickstarter. I think the funding period just passed, but she's doing a Kickstarter where she's funding another version of the Creatures Tarot, which is a black and white Creatures Tarot. I think it's actually different from this version. I am a fan of her work. I'm not buying or backing that other deck for now. I did chip in a few bucks to the campaign, but I'm not gonna bring in that deck at this time because I'm happy with the two decks that I have here. So this is the Creatures Tarot. I find this deck really, really comforting. It's another like simple deck with, I don't know, just a lot to think about. The moon. This little creature just stuck on the moon here. I don't know. This deck just gives me a lot to think about despite its surprisingly simple imagery. And then this one is the Everybody's Tarot. This one I've only done like 2 readings with, and both of them were at a party. Someone was asking about this person that they liked, and I drew the 8 of Cups, and I was like, man, that imagery is so apparent that that person is not coming back. So the first time that I did a reading with this deck for someone, it was, you know, kind of a sad reading. Sad, but not really sad. I don't think it was sad. It was more like a get your crap together kind of reading. The queens in this deck are very similar. You can see that there are unicorns here. This is a deck that I enjoy taking with me like on road trips. Just peeking through. It's a nice simple deck. It doesn't strain my eyes too much. Bright colors, very cute to read with. Look at this Justice card. This is a good mood deck for sure. I will probably do a video sometime about the good mood decks hashtag or the my adorable decks hashtag. I haven't gotten around to it, but these two would be in that category for sure. So that is the Everybody's Tarot and the Creatures Tarot. Next up, I've got the Way of the Panda Mini and the Way of the Panda regular size. These are indie decks. I normally have a pouch for this one, but I missed having it in the box, so I put it back in the box. The mini size Way of the Panda was my first ever tarot deck. And being indie decks, you know, I honestly didn't know that tarot decks could be a lot cheaper, but I'm so beyond glad that the Way of the Panda was my first one. It really set the bar high for other tarot decks. It just makes me want to look for other, like, strong tarot decks with strong voices and strong themes. This is a deck with just a really strong message throughout the whole deck, throughout each card. And I just find that kind of like dedication just really admirable. The messaging that goes throughout this deck is that you have to just accept yourself as you are, work with your natural inclinations, love yourself, be fierce, be strong, be proud. This deck has been used so much that you can see this like a kind of a warping here. I don't know how apparent it is, but this definitely does not look like a pristine deck, you know? I think even the edges have gotten kind of yellowed over time with all the shuffling that I do. I know that there is a current version that has like green gilded edges. I like what I have. I don't find this deck that hard to shuffle with either. I actually used to have the Tarot Renau, but I decided to rehome it because I wasn't connecting with it that much anymore. The Way of the Panda is still a deck that is very near and dear to my heart. I know the imagery here, like the back of my hand. I've used this deck so much, and this was a deck that I, studied with, this being the first deck that I ever had. I've used this for so many readings with other people. I've introduced it to a lot of my Asian tarot friends, and they all really love this deck. I love the anti-hustle culture that Kim is a part of, or that she like tries to have come through with her decks. There's just so much like loving life, seeing the beauty of life, taking care of yourself, like messaging that just really comes through with this deck. So the Way of the Panda, this deck is just so precious to me. Both these decks are. Next up is the Fountain Tarot. This one is one of my favorite decks as well. I can't remember how many decks I've said that about at this point, but this is truly one of my favorite decks. I saw this in Katie Flowers' Tarot and Practice video, and that was what inspired me to look deeper at the imagery, at the meanings here. This is one of those decks that I just intuitively understand, and I don't use that word lightly or with a lot of decks. For some reason, I just see the image here, and I can understand like the vibes, the energy, and I can imagine like different ways to look at these cards as well. This is like one of the most interesting Three of Wands I've ever seen. Typically the Three of Wands is a card of someone who's like looking out to sea and they're like holding one wand. This person has knotted all of the wands together or twisted them all together and like flying it around like a propeller. And there's like energy and light coming out of the wands here. It's just, I've never seen a Three of Wands like this before. The muted color palette, the soft colors are really appealing to look at. I really like using this deck in the winter time. And also in the summertime, I guess all year round. I don't know why I said that. I don't really do seasonal decks. I really enjoy using this deck for whenever I just want some simpler images and colors to look at. I say simple, even though there are colorful cards like this, but they're not so overwhelming and saturated like some other decks are. The ways that the artist uses light and shadow are really powerful. Like looking at the really dark shadow here contrasted with the light of the knees and the cloth here. Looking here with the light of the swords contrasted with the shadow on the face and the shadow of like their body. It's just really cool. It's just a deck that I just kind of understand. So another favorite deck, the Fountain Tarot. I also bought this deck secondhand too, so I'm happy that whoever used it before helped to break it in for me. Next up is the Lilifer Tarot. I reused this bag from another deck I used to have. So this one, I have the first edition, and it's funny because in a recent video where I did a tarot reading with my buddy, I completely mistook one of the cards, but I refused to get the second edition. I'm still determined to keep the first edition and still just learn the cards that way. So in the first edition, there's no gold foiling on the back or the front either, and the suits don't have like explanations on what they are. I don't mind it. It's just motivation for me to want to learn the alchemical symbols better and to learn like the astrology symbols as well. My friend Katie borrowed this deck for quite a while and she really enjoyed it. This is a deck that I haven't done too many readings with because I just want the readings with this one to be like special. I want to have like a whole interview process and like priming process with this deck. I don't need to do that with all of my decks, and I don't think you need to do that if that's not what you're feeling. But this deck just feels so special to me. I just want to have a whole like, I don't know, ritualized experience for when I start like reading with this more regularly. But until I get to that like initiation process, the orientation process with this deck, I'm not reading with it or studying with it yet. And that's okay. I know I will get to it when I get to it. Oh yeah, and the initial guidebook that came with this in the first edition looks like this. And the creator, Marianne, she offered like another guidebook that people could purchase, which I'm very happy about. So I bought the second edition guidebook, which has like more color and it's just a little bit nicer. So yeah, that is the Lilifer Tarot. Next up is the Architects Tarot. This is another deck that I haven't gotten to using yet, but I know I will sometime, and I know I like having it. So this one I heard about from Laura of Aquamarine 18, and the edges are very, very shiny. I bought this new from the creator's website, so it still has yet to be broken in. What fascinates me about this deck is just the very clean backgrounds, the very like clean line art. It is so clean and so crisp. I've barely even like flipped through it all the way, but I already know that I don't know, I like looking at it. I like imagining like how things look from the architect's perspective. Similar to the Lilifer Tarot, I also want to have a whole like priming, initiation, ritual process with this. So that's why the cards are all in order still. And I haven't even like shuffled this deck yet. I know that when the time comes for me to work with this deck, it's going to be very special. And I'm going to have a lot to like learn from this deck. I think it's really fascinating to see the world in the architect's perspective. I think it's similar to how people who are photographers or cinematographers, they see the world in a different perspective because they start understanding like the composition of things, the framing, what goes into like making the thing look like the thing. So I feel like architecture is pretty similar. Dude, that is so cool. This knight, this is like probably the Knight of Swords, and it's a horse like mountain. I feel like I'm spoiling myself, like like giving myself a spoiler since I haven't even looked through this deck fully. But I know that when I work with it, it'll be a really cool special experience. So that's the Architect's Tarot. Next up is the Inner Dimensions Tarot. And this one did not come with a box. It's from makeplayingcards.com. This deck features people but no faces and no bodies either. So the extent of the faces is like cards like this, where it just features like the nose and the mouth. But for the most part, it's very shadowy, kind of like this. So this one is marketed as a genderless deck. I think that just more means that like there are no faces in this deck, but the cards are still very much like retaining the gendered namings. This one has a PDF guidebook, so I have looked at it a little bit. I know that the creator has gone their own way with a few of these cards, and I know in the guidebook, they consider the cards like the element name instead of the suit name. So this is the Four of Fire. This is the Master of Water, or likely the King of Water, maybe the King of Cups, maybe the Queen of Cups. This is the Nine of Wands or Nine of Fire, Five of Water. As you can see, this deck is more on the monochromatic side. I find it like not that hard to read with. I have given up like another monochromatic deck before, and I've honestly had this deck for like at least a year at this point, and I still haven't like really read with it. I'm working through some other decks right now, but I still enjoy having this because I just like how different it is. It just really goes its own way. I think this will help me understand and memorize the alchemical symbols a lot better now that I'm like seeing them in every single card. So yeah, this is the Inner Dimensions Tarot. Next up is the Linestrider Tarot. I bought this secondhand, so I don't have the full box, but I do have the book that comes with it. And boy, is this a really, really thick book. Also, look at these glossy pages. Oh, look, I did not expect this. High Priestess on the cover here. I've done a couple readings with this one. The last one I remember doing was the New Moon and Capricorn reading from a few months back. It's pretty cool to live in a world where we have so many different tarot decks available to us. We can just appreciate and enjoy so many different art styles, so many different vibes across all of our decks. It's interesting how some of the cards have people in them. Some of them are more animal focused, and some of them have like different art styles too, like this sword being here in a different color than the person around it. I used to find the imagery kind of scary or intimidating because it has more like angles and sharp lines. But now, you know, in my later days, my later years of learning tarot, my tastes are changing, and I don't mind this kind of like sharp looking imagery as much. It's probably different now because I have other decks that have more like softer imagery with brighter colors. So this deck is a nice contrast to those other decks that have like, you know, the cute colors. It's really nice having decks like this, you know, compared to those decks. This is one of my like more beautiful decks for sure. If I ever do a video of like my most beautiful decks, this deck would be in that video, in that category for sure. And surprisingly, even though it has this somewhat like harsh looking imagery, I'm not that scared by it anymore. Again, I used to be scared of it, which is why I didn't have it, but now that I have it and now that I've gotten to know it, it feels like a good part of my collection. So this is the Linestrider Tarot. Or is it really the Linestrider's Journey Tarot? Next is the Tarot of the Magical Forest. This one is, ooh, a hair. This one is one of my Rider-Waite-Smith clone decks. You know, why don't I bring out the other Rider-Waite-Smith clones while I'm here? Okay, these two are the other Rider-Waite-Smith clone decks that I have. So this one is also a Rider-Waite-Smith clone deck, even though a lot of the cards do go their own way, like this Knight of Cups being on this big like cat instead of a horse. But I say Rider-Waite-Smith clone because, you know, that's clearly like the Pamela Coleman Smith Ten of Cups. This is like the Pamela Coleman Smith Nine of Wands. I really like the look of the medium used for this deck. Like, I wonder if this was made with colored pencils or something. Like, you can see the lines here, like, as if someone just took a color pencil and just drew like this the whole time. So I just really like it. I think the eyeballs are really charming. They're very comical in a way that just really speaks to me. Everyone has a different version of what they find comical versus creepy, and I do find a lot of like the decks that other people like kind of creepy. Certain decks in mind that I will not name, but this one, I don't know. I don't find creepy. I just find very comical and very cute. This one, it gives me the energy of like, it's okay to like not know what the heck you're doing. We're just kind of going through life like not knowing what we're doing. Like these eyes being wide while they're fighting, or like these Three of Pentacles, like we're supposed to be working on this project. It's almost like it's saying, do you know what the project's supposed to be? And they're like, I don't know, you're the boss. And also, why is this owl like, oh, okay, I thought that the guy and this guy were like sharing the outfit, but I see that the owl is just wearing the outfit by itself. For the longest time, I thought that they were sharing like a cloak. Yeah, so I don't know, the eyes, the faces too, like the bunny having this face, it's just very funny to me. So this is a very delightful read, delightful deck, the Tarot of the Magical Forest. Speaking of Rider-Waite-Smith clones, I'll quickly show the other two that I have. So this is the Radiant Y Spirit Tarot and the 1909 RWS Tarot, the Sawyer Redux edition. This is by Jamie Sawyer, and this is a mass market deck here. So this deck, the Radiant Y Spirit, this was the only Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I had for the longest time because I just really like the shading and the darker colors of this deck. Even though the Centennial version kind of appeals to me, I don't think I'll get it because I already have this version. I really don't need another version. Yeah, so this deck was my study deck for the longest time. I used to have the Modern Witch Tarot. That was actually my first study deck, my first Rider-Waite-Smith study deck. But eventually I got this one too, and this one just appealed to me more because of the, just like I said, the darker lines and the darker shading. This one, the 1909 RWS Sawyer Redux. I bought this last year because I was starting to crave like just a lighter version. And I just wanted to support like an independently published artist. So this one is different because they don't have like Roman numerals or any numbers on these cards, whereas these do. In the Jamie Sawyer version, you can see that there are mandalas and things like this in the background. I've seen people worry that these mandalas are like really distracting because on camera the contrast might seem, you know, very strong and very obvious. But honestly, like okay, looking at this card, I just see it almost like graffiti in the back. And the graffiti almost adds to that like devil, that devil imagery, that devil vibe. Like here, for example, like if the mandala wasn't here, then this background would just be yellow. So having the mandala here, it just adds a little bit of extra dimension, I guess. And even on here, you can see that the mandala is over here too on the stone. Like looking at this from far away, my eye is just drawn to the Empress character in the middle. Like I'm not so distracted by what's back here. And then if I do choose to look closer, what's cute is that every mandala is different too. So this one has like the pomegranate, although it kind of looks like a strawberry here. And then this one, the moon, we have the moon like symbol all around here. And the emperor, we have the ram. So it's really cool how Jamie Sawyer added all these different details into like these mandalas. Like that's just so much extra work, extra detail, you know? And not only do we have like the motif here, you also see the zodiac sign, like here's, I want to say Pisces in the mandala here, whereas here we should have Mars, or here's Aries. There's a lot of thought and a lot of detail. So this is like my perfect Rider-Waite-Smith study deck. Yeah, so that's the Radiant Y Smith and 1909 RWS Tarot Sawyer Redux edition. Next up is the Playful Heart Tarot. This one comes in a tuck flat box, which I did not want to keep around. I mean, I still have it, but I prefer to keep this in a bag instead. Although this bag is a little bit too big, but I already made it. What can you do about it? I like the baubles on here. Very texturally interesting. This one is a very, very colorful deck, hence I chose this rainbow theme to match like the colors of this deck. This is one of my more maximalist decks. There's a lot in each card, honestly, like a lot of details, a lot of colors. It can be very overwhelming, or it can be the right amount of stimulating if I'm feeling very bored or underwhelmed. This is definitely a very inner child themed deck, and I really enjoy having this deck for like comforting readings or for inspirational readings, for creative readings. There are certain cards in this deck that I really, really enjoy, that I really remember, that really stick to me. The pages in this deck are some of my favorite pages. There's a lot of joy and emotion and expressiveness in these cards. Like we can see, you know, in this card we have the happy expressions. There's some scared expressions here. There's some content expressions. This is one of my favorite Five of Wands. Like, look at them racing and look at this constipated looking character. They kind of, I don't know, they just look very comical and very silly to me. It's a very endearing, comforting deck. So I really, really enjoyed this. It really inspires my creativity. It inspires me just with all these different colors and the distinct art style and the happy facial expressions. This is a very funny Ten of Swords. The fact that this is like a deflated balloon instead of like a person, I don't know, just interesting. The Seven of Swords, why do you have a beak? Oh, it's a mask, actually. I don't know. It's just funny. It's just a very funny, comical deck. So that's the Playful Heart Tarot. And I know that this creator, Kitten Chops, they have a Marseille deck out as well. I'm planning to get it once I'm more interested and ready to learn Marseille. So that is definitely on my eventual wish list, but not for now. Next, we've got the Seames Tarot. Seames as in Southeast Asian Myths and Stories. Oh my god, it's so Asian of me to not take the tag off the thing, right? We're gonna stuff that back in there. I bought this pouch from Vietnam last year, so it's definitely the perfect deck to keep this Southeast Asian Tarot deck in. I know that the second edition, the later edition, has like an actual box. So this is the first edition. It comes with a tuck flap box, which is why I've put it into this bag. And I know that the second edition also has like green edges. I don't care. I like this edition as it is. This is Make Playing Cards cardstock, I want to say, so the shuffling is very smooth. So this being the Southeast Asian Myths and Stories, this guidebook actually details all of the stories that are in this deck. So this High Priestess, for example, here is the artist and the country that the artist is from. Either the country that they're from or the story that this card is from. Perhaps there's a distinction to be made there. So the guidebook explains the story behind this figure, who they are, whether it's fictional or real, and what's being depicted in the card here. So this deck definitely had a lot of work and a lot of thought going into it. Like there are so many different artists who are depicting so many different things, so many different stories and myths. And I did not grow up, you know, learning about a lot of different Southeast Asian myths. So I'm really happy to have this deck and very, very gradually learn about the different things that have influenced and affected, you know, Southeast Asian countries and their cultures and stories. This is one card in particular that I really remember. This is the Eight of Pentacles, which is a story from Vietnam. So this card is basically depicting the story of how Vietnam came to grow so much watermelon, which is very fascinating to me because I didn't realize that Vietnam and watermelons were a thing. But there's a whole story behind, you know, why Vietnam is very known for its watermelons, I guess, or why watermelons were very prominent in Vietnam. This is definitely a study-worthy deck on par with like Tarot of the Divine and other story-based, mythologically based decks. Look how beautiful that card is. Look how beautiful that card is. This deck is just so fascinating. All right, so that is the Seames Tarot, Southeast Asian Myths and Stories. Next is the Little Avatar Tarot. This one was made by Push Kitty, who has done a lot of other really incredible decks. And I used to have the Afro Avatar Tarot, but ended up giving that one away because I just wasn't connecting to it as much as I used to. This one is just the perfect Avatar deck for me. I have seen other Avatar decks on the market throughout the years, but this one is just my perfect Avatar deck. It features scenes from the show and characters from the show, but it feels to me that these are all scenes and characters that actually make sense. I have seen other decks, for example, they depict like maybe Sokka as the fool, and I was like, that doesn't really make sense to me. Aang's the main character. Aang would be the fool. The devil as Firelord Ozai with these two characters like being chained to the devil is just perfect to me. It makes so much sense. And in all these cards, really, it's just a very, very enjoyable deck. And like I mentioned, again, just the scenes and the characters that Push Kitty chose are just fantastic. They really exemplify the cards well. I would say this is a really good beginner deck for that reason, or like if you're into Avatar, The Last Airbender, and you really understand the core themes of the show and the themes of the character arcs and everything, then this deck will make a lot of sense to you. And obviously, if you don't understand Avatar, then this is just another like fandom deck. And Push Kitty's art style is just super cute. I don't know how she's able to make and draw so many different tarot decks, but I really, really commend her for it because these are not easy feats. So this is the wonderful, wonderful little Avatar Tarot. Next, I've got the Turning Terrestrial Tides Tarot. I just bought this during a recent trip to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I bought this from an independent bookstore, so was very happy to support the bookstore and the indie deck. Look at this cute, tiny little guidebook. This text is super small, though. If you have bad eyes, prepare to have a magnifying glass. So this is a zine-themed deck. It feels very, like, indie in this way. I guess this is another collage deck. I've mentioned a couple times how I don't have many collage decks, but this is definitely another, like, collage deck. So this one is clearly, like, black and white or grayscale, and it features not only keywords, but also key phrases on each card. And I really like the zine style of this deck. It just looks like there's a lot of different elements that are like collaged together. Even the font here, it looks like how people would like copy paste, like in real life, copy like cut out and paste like different letters onto something. So I just really like the different like not mediums, just the different fonts, the different design choices. There we go. The different design choices is what I meant to say. This is a really fascinating deck, and I'm in this phase in my life right now where I am more interested in zines and independently published things and artsy things like this where it doesn't look all clean and put together, or like I guess this is put together, but it's in a very like purposefully anarchist kind of way. It's just a bunch of different elements like collaged together. I'm not explaining it very well. I'm not trying to like put down the deck. I'm definitely not intending to put down the deck. I'm trying to say this all as like compliments. Yeah, so it's just a very fascinating deck. I can thank Laura of Aquamarine 18 and probably 22 Zines too for getting me into this deck and into zines in general. So yeah, and I've done like daily draws with this. I've done like really short readings. I think the best use for this deck is just daily draw, or maybe like a 2-card reading. Because any more than that, like all the words and the elements get pretty overwhelming for me. So yeah, really enjoy this for just very simple, straightforward, quick messages. So that's the Turning Terrestrial Tides Tarot. Next, I've got the Spectrowhirl Tarot. As I've mentioned before, I've considered it a color barfin kind of deck. The creator has made an oracle as well called the Spectrowhirl Oracle, I want to say. And I think it's also playing cards themed. And dude, I like might buy it later on, even though this deck is still intimidating to me. Like, I've done very few readings with this deck. I've looked at it a lot. I've flipped through it a lot. I've done like a few 1 card a day draws with this deck. But I've only done like maybe 1 reading with it because the cards are still a little bit like intimidating or a little bit overwhelming to me. And they might seem like overwhelming on camera, but I can assure you that in real life, they're not as overwhelming when I only look at 1 card at a time. But I think that's why I don't read with it as much, because I only want to look at 1 card at a time and like get to know the images a lot better. This is definitely more on the maximalist side of, card imagery. And I enjoy having this deck in contrast to the other decks that are more monochromatic or more like white space themed. I'm really intrigued by the creator's artwork. I might buy their Oracle deck later on, even though I don't know, man. I want to buy it because I want to have it and look at it, but I don't know if I'll read with it. And I've given up so many decks that I don't read with, so I don't know. I need to make friends who like have the Spectrowhirl Oracle and other decks that I want but don't read with so that I can just live vicariously through those friends. One of these days, I will be someone who like really reads with this deck and really gets it and does magical, fantastical readings with this deck. So that is the Spectrowhirl Oracle. Dude, I wish my hermit times were like this. Like, look at all these colors. Literally like Sailor Moon vibes, but not really. Almost at the end here, we've got the White Numen Tarot. This one was a very kind gift from Livy of Crescent Dreams Tarot. They have edged it in this beautiful like dark blue, dark periwinkle color, and it really matches the back so well. I could not have had a better color for this. So thank you, Livy. Thank you, Livy, for the gift. I love secondhand decks. I've had only one experience with this deck besides looking at it in walkthroughs and flip-throughs. During my bachelorette party last year in Portland, my bridesmaids hired a tarot reader to give me readings, and then she also gave like the rest of our party readings, and she used this deck. She had a lot of different types of readings to offer, so I requested a deity reading. And I'm not one who has worked with or looked into deities much. I've never had a patron of my own or a deity that I've really felt connected to on any sort of level. So I was curious to hear from an actual tarot reader, like what would come through in her deity reading for me. And this was all over Discord, so it was all online. So I shared with her some of the questions and thought processes I was going through, and she basically pulled some cards and told me like who she felt was speaking to me. And she named two deities. She named Dionysus and Aphrodite. And, you know, part of my self-questioning at the time was like wanting to break out of my gender expression, the normal gender expression I had always felt, embrace my identity more as someone who's not quite straight and maybe not quite a woman, not quite a gal, embrace myself more because I am a little bit afraid of breaking out of the norms that I've set for myself, really. The deities that she mentioned being Dionysus and Aphrodite, you know, she gave me some messages around those deities. And later on, I like bought a poetry book that was about Aphrodite to learn about her more. And I've also recently read a Greek gods book. Granted, it was a retelling of Greek god stories that was written by Rick Riordan. So it's definitely geared towards juveniles. But what can I say? Sometimes I just need that type of material. So I read about how Dionysus is also the god of like people who are confused about their identity, the gender identity. And I never knew that about Dionysus before. It just makes sense in hindsight that, you know, Dionysus and Aphrodite would be the two deities, the two archetypes that this reader named. I'm really curious to hear more, to learn more about these deities in the future and to work with these archetypes and these energies. But yeah, all that to say, the whole reason why I mentioned this is because the deck that she was using was the White Numen Tarot. So that was my only experience with this deck so far, but it intrigued me enough to want to eventually get a copy. So I'm grateful that, you know, that my pal Livy thought of me. By coincidence, I ended up having this deck long after I got that tarot reading about the deities. So that is the White Numen Tarot. A couple decks left, so I'll show them at the same time. I just got these very recently. This is the Gentle Tarot and the Crow Tarot. I bought these secondhand from the same person. I bought them because I was curious. I will say the Crow Tarot might not be a deck that I'm going to keep long term. I'm not even sure if I'm going to keep it like much longer after I film this video. I am glad that I've got it and I've got to play with it. I will probably find a good friend to gift it to. I know one of my other tarot friends does have the Crow Tarot and they really love this deck. For some reason it's not quite hitting with me. I did buy it from, you know, that person secondhand because I just wanted to experiment with it and see it for myself in person. Now I'm glad I got to satiate my curiosity. Satisfy my curiosity? Yeah, satisfy my curiosity. I recently went to an independent tarot bookstore. I went to Tarot Arts in South Pasadena and got to see other MJ Cullinan decks. So I got to look at the Forhaxa Tarot as well. That one I'm also like kind of tempted by because I saw someone flipping through it and reading with it like online. I saw a Tarot Magpie reading with it. I don't know if it's a deck that I just enjoy aesthetically but not for myself, or if it's a deck that I could enjoy if I actually had it. But, you know, I already have so many other decks that I am working through, and I have other animal decks that I do enjoy and other like mystical, spiritual decks that I do enjoy. So I don't think I really need other MJ Cullinan decks. So yeah, that was my very brief experience with the Crow Tarot. I've had this one for like a week. Very new to my collection. And probably very soon out the door. The other deck I've got, though, hopefully this one will stay a little bit longer, is the Gentle Tarot. This is, I don't know what edition this is, but I know Mari in the Sky is working on an Oracle deck right now, and I am pretty excited for that also. To be honest, I've always written off like this deck because I'm not much into animal decks, so I didn't know how much I would find use in this. So I got this at the same time as the Crow Tarot, like just last week. And I actually told my friend Katie, like, I might just give this to you because after flipping through it, I'm not sure if I connect with it. But then I decided, you know what? This deck is really popular. And one of my other pals, like, who comments on my videos a lot, I know that she really loves the Gentle Tarot. So I'm like, okay, look, I find value in what, you know, what she likes and what she enjoys. Her name's Jo. So I'm going to give this a try because I know Jo likes it. And I guess I just want to give this deck a real shot before just writing it off and giving it to my friend Katie, or any other friend too. I've heard a lot of amazing things about this deck, how comforting it is, how amazing it is, and I guess I just want to experience it for myself. I will say the art is just really beautiful. I really hope that this can be a deck that I can enjoy and, you know, keep in my collection for a long time, but if it ends up only being a deck that I only keep for a little bit and then move on, at least it taught me something in that time, you know? So that is the Gentle Tarot. And very quick, lastly, the last couple of decks here. These are not quite tarot decks that I actually read with and use, but they are kind of tarot decks in that they're tarot inspired, so I will share them here. These are the two large Sailor Moon tarot decks that I have. This one is from this creator. I will put it up on the screen. I actually just use these as wall decorations for the longest time. That's why they have these little squares on them, squares of adhesive residue. This one is from Shino Yume, which I'll also put on the screen or in the description. Here we go. Shino Yume, which is an artist in Southeast Asia somewhere. So this one was a gift from my friend in my first year of learning tarot. He bought this off of the artist's Etsy shop. And these are probably a little bit sun faded because they've had like some sun on them, but I don't mind it. They're really beautiful decorations. This is a set of just the 22 major arcana. We have the Fool, the Magician. I don't know why I'm reading them. We know what the tarot cards are. The artist's art style is very distinct. It kind of reminds me of like tattoo art styles in a way, especially these like eyelashes and stuff. I used this for my Wheel of the Year like a few years ago, and I remember Justice, Artemis was my my card of that year. Yeah, this is one of the Sailor Moon decks I have, and then this is the other Sailor Moon deck that I have. This one is the full 78 card tarot deck. First of all, the cards being so narrow reminds me of like Cardcaptor Sakura, you know, like holding the cards like this and being all like, oh, heart the cards or something like that. Maybe I'll do a flip through in another video. I'm sure people would enjoy like looking at it all and living vicariously through, you know, through people who do have this deck. Let's see. So these are the majors. We have the characters on the card and the major name, and the characters are listed here. And then we have the minors as well. So the names are also listed on the bottom of the card. So we have the 4 heavenly kings here. We have the sisters. So it's really cool, dude. The art is just really, really beautiful. I've been reading the manga for the first time because my entire life I've only seen the anime but never actually read the manga. I used to write it off as like, I just don't vibe with the art style, but now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, I do like the art style. It's very dreamy, very romantic. I can see why it was so popular back in the day. So I've read like the first 3 volumes of the manga so far. Once we move into our new place, I'll continue to borrow the others and read those volumes as well. But yeah, so far I'm on volume 4 out of 10. Here's the pages, the knights, the villains from each season, and the kings, the Sailor Starfighters in Helios. So yeah, maybe I'll do a flip through in another video, a proper flip through so y'all can see. But yeah, these are the couple Sailor Moon decks that I have. I have one more Sailor Moon deck, but I will show this in the other video with the Oracle cards and the other like non-tarot decks and stuff. I also have tarot charms and tokens, but I will share those in another video because my voice is going today. So that is all the tarot decks that I have. Woo, we made it. Looking forward to doing more stuff with my tarot channel once I get settled in my new place and all that jazz. Alright, well, the Oracle deck video is coming up soon, so look out for that one. Alright, that is all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye!